This is a little bit of a different version of the Living with Parkinson's meetup this month. We're recording this without our usual live audience for circumstances that are just frankly not worth explaining. But we're glad to be with you today, and we'll hope you will get something out of this video. And I'm sorry we weren't able to do this with a live audience. We'll get back to that with our next month's meetup. It's now March 2026, by the way. This is our March 2026 Living with Parkinson's meetup. And what we're going to talk about today is some of the common questions that people often have about Parkinson's that there may not really necessarily be answers for. So the goal of this conversation is we're going to try to share our experiences of some of those questions. We have a guest panelist joining us today, and Devon, I didn't tell you I was going to do this. I hope you don't mind, but can you just give a quick soundbite about what your story is with Parkinson's?
Yeah, sure. I'm Devon Cohn. I was diagnosed with Parkinson's in 2016. When I was diagnosed, I was living in DC, well, living between Europe and DC, but then moved to Colorado 6 years ago during COVID. So lived near the Davis Phinney Foundation, live in a small town, do a lot of outdoor activities, but also still work. So trying to manage all those things in my mid-40s. That's it.
Thanks, Devon, and thanks for joining us today. I kind of sprung this on Devon recently to join us, and I'm glad you joined us. So thanks for being here, Devon.
Welcome, welcome.
Yeah, welcome.
And of course, thanks to our regular crew that's able to be here today as well. So the first question, let's start with why me? How did you navigate that question when you had it? When you were wondering why you, how did you do that? What did you navigate? How did you get out of the trap of that? Did it not seem like a trap? What do you think?
You know, I don't mind jumping in first. This one, I didn't spend a lot of time on it. And I didn't spend a lot of time on it because I had a kiddo that was diagnosed 10 years before I was diagnosed with Parkinson's at the age of 8 with type 1 diabetes. And it was a question he had a lot as an 8-year-old. And I thought, for heaven's sakes, I'm 48. I can't lay around thinking about poor me and why me. So that was a real incentive for me not to perseverate about that. And you know, why not me? It's a hard one.
I think I originally thought it was something like I did something, my past life was too good. And I said before I passed away in my past life, give me something I can struggle with. Give me something that will show me how gritty I can be. And so I got Parkinson's, and the universe said you can handle this, and they gave it to me. And I didn't wonder why in the first year. I wondered why in the first week, but occasionally that why comes up like every month. Just a little bit, like a little trickle of why. Then I don't spend so much time on it because it's fruitless. You know, there's no way to know why. There's no way to know why my dad also got Parkinson's disease when there's no genetic link. And so I just basically, when that question overwhelms me, I get ice cream, I get chocolate, I'll get cookies, I'll text Chris about my bad dates that I go on.
I'm not really wired that way. I wasn't really thinking why me when I first got the diagnosis. But since all this information has come out in the last few years about toxic exposures and poisons, and of course you think, well, why me? What did I do how did I get exposed to these things that might have been causing my Parkinson's, but still don't have a good answer.
I have some specific thoughts and theories as to literally why me, like why did I get it? What was I exposed to? All of that, which is a whole other story. But I didn't really think of why me in the beginning, because quite honestly, I thought, I don't think it's me. Like, I know I was diagnosed. I had a DAT scan. I had all these things. But it's also, I think I told you this before, Chris, it's also like in your head, right? Not, metaphorically in your head, but it's in your head. It's damaged and you can't see. In the beginning, I didn't really have any symptoms. So I just didn't really think, I kind of thought, and I didn't tell anyone for a long time for other reasons as well. But, by not telling people and by kind of ignoring it, I kind of thought maybe it's not me. Like maybe this is still something else. A little bit of that, but also, the other feeling I had, which I hate to admit, is I didn't think why me, but I thought I looked at everyone else and I thought, why not them? Just kind of feeling angry at everyone else, which I kept, I masked very well. I was having a good life. Everything was fine, but I did feel underneath a lot of like, you know, yeah, just like everybody else's lives are going to feel and look a lot different than mine.
That still happens for me sometimes when I see some of the people, and I ref soccer games, which I talk about sometimes, and I see high school students or even adults playing soccer, and I'm like, man, that's just not a thing I can do anymore. I can ref, I can still do that, but I had to change the way I approach something I really loved, and when I see people still able to do that, it's really envy, maybe. I don't know what it is, but
I
so I can
think
relate
it's
to.
grief. I think that feeling of anger is like, dang it, I really can't do that anymore. Roller skates, high heels, and ladders, all of which I liked. High heels, maybe not, but roller skates and ladders. I miss that. I miss being able to just get up on a ladder and not be worried about it.
Yeah. Although you do use a chainsaw sometimes, as we've
I
heard
do
before.
use a chainsaw still.
So,
Yeah.
Karen, what was your experience of this question?
I think I experienced two sides to the question. One was the why me, poor me. I just have this picture of myself with like sitting in my pajamas on the floor. I wasn't working anymore. And I'm like, when is, why me, why me, why me? Um, that was useless. I spent a very short amount of time there. Then there was that sort of intellectual perturbance of like, why me literally, what happened. And I also had the genetic background. And then later, as I wasn't progressing as much as other people, I was like, well, really confused about that. Now I have some answers about my Parkinsonism, but I think that it's natural to go there, but I don't think staying there was very helpful for me for either side of that, because it was more about getting on with life. How am I going to be happy? There are more fruitful questions and more productive questions I could ask. How will I be happy? How can I serve other people? How can I be less self-centered about it all? Not judging, just saying that's how I was being.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so maybe that points to the next question that I think a lot of people ask, which is, okay, fine, me. When do I tell other people? When do I tell my spouse? When do I tell my parents? When do I tell my children? When do I tell my work? I think that's a really hard question people face too. What do you think about that? Anybody have an experience of how they navigated that issue?
For me, I was just ready to tell everyone right away. It was important for me. And I was thinking, if I were someone who loved someone who had Parkinson's, I'd want to know about it, to help them and to interact with them. So, I know I have some friends and acquaintances who've gone for years without telling people and still haven't told people on it. So I know there's a great variety of how people approach it. So I think it really depends on who you are and how you approach things. But for me, it was just, it's a problem. It's just helpful for me to share it with everybody.
My dad had Parkinson's. He was a lawyer. He did not want anyone to know. He got it when he was in his early 50s. Professionally, he was extremely worried about losing being a partner in a firm or opportunities for advancement. And he made my mom promise that she would not tell a soul. Like that included cousins, relatives. I mean, he told the kids, but that was really hard on her. And she needed support and she needed someone to confide in. And she was loyal to him and didn't tell a soul. And that went on for like 8 years until it was obvious. He said, when it gets obvious, let me know. And they were on a scuba diving trip, I think. And somebody said, oh, do you have Parkinson's? And he was mortified, because they saw his hand. And then I think it was a sense of relief. But when I got diagnosed, one, professionally, it was interfering with my job. And so it wasn't clear to me that I was long due to tell. Second of all, I just didn't want to provide that experience for my husband. I'm a little bit of a blabbermouth as it is. So it was hard for me to contain it. And then I needed to say it out loud, but I didn't want to put my husband in that position.
It was similar for me, Karen. Work, I was feeling impacted at my job and felt like I needed to be really transparent with work quickly. And then also, frankly, I think, I had kids at home and I didn't want them later to be upset that I hadn't told them. I Stan, like you were saying, it's our ethic in our house, kind of how we manage things head on. So I would have felt guilty about it. I sent out a big email to everybody and I told people, this is what's going on with me. I just want you to know. And I also don't want it to be the focus of every conversation we have from here going forward because I don't have the answers. I don't know why I had it. Yes, my dad had it. I don't carry the genetics. I don't know. So I tried to answer some of those questions so they didn't ask me also.
I want to just jump in and add a little thought here that I don't think I really said this at the beginning, but I think it should be said. No one should take the way we are sharing our experience to mean that's what their experience should be or in any way. I mean, this is really just to say if you're thinking about these are some thoughts we've had, but you need to take your own approach to these problems. And I think there are maybe things that you could get stuck on that maybe aren't going to be helpful that you should be careful about, but you don't have to do it the way we're doing it for sure
Right.
or have done it.
I by no means profess to have the right way for anybody else, and I don't always have the right way for me, and I find that out sometimes the hard way. But um, like Karen, I'm just kind of an open book. You might have noticed that, some of you.
I texted my family while I was in a movie theater, or while they were in a movie theater, and I didn't realize they're in the movie theater. And I just texted them like 3 days after I got diagnosed. And then I told friends one by one. I made a list of all the people that I told, and I noted down their reactions. And then I noted down my regret level. Like, do I regret telling this person or do I not regret telling this person? And I found that most of the people I told in that first initial few months, I regretted telling because they didn't understand what it was. I mean, I was still trying to understand what it was. So if I just said I have a brain disease, they would have understood that better than saying I have Parkinson's disease. But when I finally came out to the world that I have this disease, the entire world is on Facebook on my private Facebook page. And it was years later. I think I did that like 5 or 6 years after diagnosis. So I did not do anything advocacy related or marketing my Parkinson's. That sounds really bad, but I can't think of the right word. I'm like word finding problems. But that not until 5 to 6 years after my diagnosis, because I was still able to hide it. And I also was still coming to terms with it. It wasn't easy. I was working full time. And so I'm still working full time. So all of these were concerns and considerations.
Three, I had the same kind of experience as you. I told a couple close friends, but my family early on, but then didn't really tell anyone else for a long time, partially for a lot of reasons, but I'm glad I did it that way, especially given how my life kind of worked out where I moved and I developed all these really new, wonderful new friendships early on. And, that was already 5, 6 years into my diagnosis as well. And I was glad that I made those friendships first, that I had the luxury to do that, to like develop those friendships first before I became the person with Parkinson's, or before I became the person that, always had bad news or needed help or whatever. So yeah, so I think that and work, I was very hesitant to tell. And I was working remotely at that time. And I wasn't trying to hide it. I was trying to manage there's so much about Parkinson's you can't control. I was like, I want to control my story. I want to control my time frame. And then I kind of came out digitally a year and a half ago because it was just much easier than telling people over and over again. I actually did not want to have the conversation over and over again. So I just kind of threw it all out there to my entire kind of global network that I used to work a lot in other countries. And even people there that would never see me, got to know pretty quickly.
Yeah, it's interesting. For me, I don't think my story is very interesting on this front, so I won't say much about it, but I took more of a Stan approach. I was kind of an open book from day one. I mean, I didn't tell my parents right away just because I thought I was worried they would feel guilty or something because I didn't know anything about the genetics of it. I didn't know any answers about that. Now I know I don't have any genetic background, triggers in my story, but Other than that, I told my sister like the day it happened. I told, my partner, and I knew that from the day I went to the neurologist and he said, maybe that you want to see a specialist. And anyway, but yeah, it wasn't that interesting of an experience for me because I was just open about it from the beginning, more or less. I didn't tell everyone, but I didn't have any real concerns about it. I thought, well, this is a thing. I guess it's just where we're going now. I mean, I was apprehensive maybe, but it wasn't a problem. So anyway, we'll leave it there for that one. Um, there's kind of a series of questions that I think relate to each other that we'll go to next, which are all about progression. Um, and I think maybe we can start with the question, okay, doc, fine, Parkinson's, but how fast is my progression going to be? And maybe I'll list the other questions that relate to this. I think the other one is, okay, how do I slow that down? And then, finally, I think the last thing that's related to this is maybe, about will there be a cure? How close are we? Will it shorten my life? So these are a couple different takes on the same kind of theme. What is progression going to be? Can it be slowed? Can it be stopped? What about my lifespan? What happens there? Um, anybody have an approach to that they want to share?
I love that you call it an approach because it is just an approach and an opinion. I think they're really good questions. I think they're big questions. And I think I work really, really hard at learning to accept I don't have the answers to really very much at all. Though what is it? The longer I live, the less I know, or I try to stay curious about what's going on in terms of a cure. I think sometimes the trap of the cure is that there's always things that are promising and exciting, and I think that makes us hopeful as folks struggling with a chronic condition. But the trap can be, oh, I'll wait and I'll do that after the cure, or I'll do that. We also saw this with our son with type 1 diabetes. We got very involved in some of the organizations around research, and they kept saying, oh, it'll be for sure in your lifetime. Well, Sawyer read that as an 8-year-old as like it's coming before Christmas kind of thing. And I saw very quickly like, ooh, I'm gonna have to change my thinking about that. So so I don't know if I answered all of them, Chris. There were a lot of questions now and I'm forgetting them, but I went to the cure one. And the how long do we live? Excuse me, how do any of us really know how long we're going to live, right? I mean, what did I use? I said in the first book that I wrote, I could get hit by a bus at any moment. And my kids would say, Mom, just look both ways before you cross the street. I just think that's good advice, in general principles. Yeah. So.
Interesting. My doctor said, my very first visit, he said, well, oh, you're going to work another 10 years. And I was like, well, that's not what happened to me, for me. At all. And I was like, oh, somehow I've fallen short, or look at me, I'm a mess. Like, why am I not should I be working? Should I not? And only I could answer that question for myself. But as far as, when my dad had Parkinson's, they kept saying, oh, we're 5 years away from something big, something big. We're 5 years away. Well, that was like 25 years ago. And I'm still hearing that we're, close, but it's not here. And so that kind of burst my bubble a little bit because I went into it thinking, well, I can't believe you. Or where's the 5 years? Tell me about that. But, and living with condition for a while, I also am like, it's been 10 years now and we're still not getting the 5 year.
Well, I was just going to say, I've never really put much faith in a cure. I think it's not going to happen. But for me, after I'd had Parkinson's for a while, I realized that it is a pretty slowly progressive process. So for me, there's sort of good news, bad news. The good news is every time I wrote my doctor ahead of time before I saw her, I say, it's progressed a little bit, but it's not that much bad, not that much worse. On the other hand, I came up with this idea called micro grievances, or micro, just little things that would change that, I'd lose a function here, or a new problem would develop, and I'd have to go through a grief reaction to deal with it. So the good news is it goes slowly and you get used to it. The bad news is you have to get used to it every time something happens where you suddenly can't climb the ladder or whatever it is, that you have to say, okay, well, that's another loss. So you're grieving loss, micro griefs. So the other part of this is, I don't know if any of you guys remember, but Polly did a interview of a researcher in the Netherlands a couple of years ago, and he had a paper. He talked about a paper called "The Elephant in the Room," that basically dealt with the mortality of Parkinson's. And basically, he said in this paper that people who do live a shorter life with Parkinson's than people who don't have Parkinson's if they match for age and sex, etc. And the older you are, the less that time is different, which makes sense. So if you're younger, it's going to be longer. If you're older, it's going to be shorter. But he said that that most people with Parkinson's still live a healthful, productive and satisfying life. So just because you're going to might die a few years earlier or a few months earlier, it doesn't mean your quality of life is necessarily that much different.
Yeah, it's also worth noting that statistics don't really mean anything for an individual, right?
Right.
So,
Well,
so
it means something.
yeah, but it's not doesn't mean you're gonna if what the number says isn't necessarily going to mean that I'm going to be,
Right.
it's not going to necessarily be my number. But yeah, I just
Yeah.
want to make sure that nobody reads that paper and thinks, oh, I'm going to be, that would be a mistake to read it and say, oh, it's going to be shortened to that average number for my age or whatever.
Yeah, and you might live 10 years longer than the average, so it's hard to tell. Yeah.
But yeah, thanks for referencing that article and that podcast. We can put a link to that in the resources when we publish the video to that podcast episode that as the interview Polly had. Sorry, Stan, I sort of jumped in there and I don't want to cut you off.
No, that was pretty much my idea. That's fine. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks.
It's hard. The progression thing is tough because it's different for everybody. And it's also, for me, the Parkinson's symptoms, like tremor. I have tremor-dominant Parkinson's, and my tremor is pretty well controlled with medicines. The part that's been really disabling for me is dystonia. And that has really impacted my quality of life. And that has been a more recent thing in the last 2.5, 3 years, this cervical dystonia stuff that was giving me migraines. And not everybody with Parkinson's gets dystonia. My dad didn't have it. My dad was diagnosed around age 75 and died from Parkinson's related complications at 83. But he didn't have dystonia. So I think it's that micro loss thing. And then there's some big ones. The big one for me was probably not being able to do my job that I loved. That was more of a macro loss. I grieved that more than probably I grieved my diagnosis. And I'm really grateful that I've gotten ahead for right now, knock on wood, of the dystonia. I tried a lot of interventions that at the beginning I would not have tried. I'm getting Botox shots all over the place to help hand dystonia and neck dystonia. And I think I was one of them. I know, Chris, if I'm jumping ahead about when to take medicine or not to take medicine, or I was kind of in this camp, I'm going to hold out as long as I can and not start medicine. I was worried about dyskinesias. And I wished in retrospect I would have started them sooner because they really did help my tremor. And as of now, knock on wood, I'm not struggling with dyskinesia. So, and I know for many, Sri, that has been a real life-changing piece for you, right?
Yeah, it's been life-changing and it's my worst symptom. I mean, what my one neurologist told me is that you respond to the medicine so beautifully. And I said, doesn't everybody respond in that way? And he said, no, they don't. And then, of course, that was my blessing, but it's also my curse because I respond so beautifully because I'm sensitive to it that now even the lowest dose extended release gives me dyskinesia. And it's hard to maintain a job or be functional on calls or going out and traveling for work when you're like this. And it's very uncomfortable for people to see. Like my niece thought the other day, in the sense that I was holding up my phone. She just happened to call randomly, and she's 9 years old. And she said, "Why are you shaking all? Why is the phone moving all over the place?" And I said, "Oh, okay." I mean, I don't know what to really say to that, but I've had a couple of adults in conversation with me through Zoom or whatever, saying, can you please not shake so much? Or can you please put the phone down or the laptop or whatever it is? And I'm like, I would love to be able to do that. I would love to be able to not shake, but I have no control over it. And so I try different things to calm down my dyskinesia. And I thought actually when I saw other people with dyskinesia in my first 5 or 6 years, I'm like, oh God, I'm not going to get that. Positive, I'm not going to get that because I don't feel anything now. But the last 3 years, it's been very much slowly coming up. And so everything that I thought I wouldn't get, I'm now getting. And so you just deal with it. And I don't have a lot of sadness about it in one sense. I'm not mourning what I've lost. I mean, I just have to get on with it. I mean, when it comes to photography and holding a camera, that is something I mourn a little bit, but then I'm thinking, I'll find another way to work around it. I'll do a different type of photography. I'll do something else. So with me, it's just about changing my life and adapting to things that the best I can.
It's such a difficult subject to think about medication, the way it affects us. As far as my experience of thinking about progression, I wrote that off as very quickly because I realized, how am I ever going to know? I read about it and I saw there's no real answers as far as we can really pin it down and say this is what's going to happen. And so I just said, well, I can only do the best I can do. And it seems like I took the advice that I got that seemed to be the best, which was, you know, do these things to try to live a healthy life generally and to manage your symptoms and deal with the changes as they come. One thing I want to draw attention to real quick, and then I'm going to jump to Devon and get out of the way. But I just want to draw attention to the idea that was relevant or was really significant to me, which is I was concerned about differential diagnoses. And because some of those do progress faster. Some of them, as Karen is experiencing lately, are not that way. Others do. And so as I thought about that, I was like, man, why if I have Parkinson's and that's unlikely? Are you not sure why do the doctors not think it's MSA, PSP, another condition that is maybe a little less likely for me to have, but it would be a different prognosis in terms of progression, probably. But even then, we don't really have a great answer about that. So that's when I said, okay, this is silly. I'm not going to think about this anymore because even if I did have an answer, it wouldn't be an answer. And so I just that's how I got over that question. And now I'm done. Devin, what's up for you? How did you
Yeah,
handle this?
no. I was going to say, I wonder if anyone had this experience. When I was first diagnosed, the second appointment I went to after my parents called the first doctor and said it must be wrong. And she said, I don't think so. And he said, this doesn't make any sense. And she said, I don't think so. Anyway, so they tried to question the doctor a little bit, but anyway, they came to my second appointment or the second time I went in a couple months later. And that was the first thing my dad asked. What is progression going to be? And he really wants answers from doctors. And again, they can't really tell you that. But one thing that my doctor at that time did say, which I don't know if anyone else has heard of, so I don't want to give wrong information, but he did say that, I really can't tell at all right now. Like, I have no idea what to tell you now. I'd have a better indication of how you'd progress in a year or two once you're already progressing. So basically, he told me that, everyone is so different. Like you said, Chris, everyone is so different. Clearly, everyone has different symptoms and different problematic symptoms at different times in their lives. But, he did say everyone progresses differently, but for the same person, you probably progress at the same rate over time. Anyway, so that anyone else had heard that. So like he said, after a year, and I can see how you progressed in a year, I can gauge a little bit better how you're going to progress years further because it's going to stay at the same rate, maybe barring a little bit of things you do differently or, vice versa. But so that's what I heard, which I haven't really heard again, but I don't know if anyone else ever heard that.
I've definitely heard from other physicians that they think that argument that I just articulated is actually dead wrong, that it's not true, that we can't get some sense. Now, it's not going to be perfect, but I've heard people say things very similar to what you just mentioned, Devin, that once you see a pattern, that pattern is likely to be sort of consistent, generally speaking, barring some significant other change.
I guess that does make sense. And the last thing I want to say is that, I only see my neurologist once a year, sometimes less than that. It's a long drive and, just not very convenient for me in my life. But either way, and, they're also in high demand as well, unfortunately. But anyway, every time I see, most times I see him, especially once I got over the like, every time I go in, I'm just going to cry the whole time and, I try to understand things and have them counsel me, have more of a counseling session than a doctor's appointment in a way, a traditional doctor's appointment. But once I got over that and kind of within a few years of being diagnosed, I started to come to him and I'd say, I'm doing really well, right? Like because he sees patients all the time. I said, in comparison to other people, I'm doing really well, right? And he'd say, he said, he's very much a doctor, very, very evidence-based, where he said, he'd always respond to me, you're progressing pretty average. Like
No,
you're
I'm
on,
exceptional. I'm
you're
sure
on
you're not seeing what I'm seeing
yeah,
right,
you're on
Devon.
the
Oh,
typical that I thought you'd be on. And yes,
oh,
that 5 to 7 years this and 7 to 8 years this.
yeah.
So yeah, so I kept saying like, trying to lighten the mood, saying, trying to have him confirm to me that I'm doing really well. But that being said, like you said, Chris, I guess it does make sense that if you see a pattern, that pattern is likely to continue. So yeah.
Anyway, so let's go on to the next question. I actually, Kat, you actually brought it up. So the question that you raised, Kat, was about medication. When should you start it? That's obviously a question a lot of people have. I think we've already talked about this a little bit, but maybe we can go over it again if anybody has anything else to add to that question. I don't have much to say on it myself, but anybody got anything?
So I can speak to it a little bit. When I first got diagnosed, I tried to hold off on medication as much as possible. And I actually got medication originally in the beginning, and I did not react well to it. I got a lot of nausea and vomiting and lightheadedness from taking the medication. So I think at that time it was too much for me at the standard dose. But as I progressed, I kept saying, I don't need medication, I don't need medication, because I had the same thinking like it'll make my progression faster, which is incorrect. It's a rumor that goes around that really needs to be eradicated. That is not true. But you only learn that through studying and talking to the people with experience. And what was I going to say about that? Oh my God, I'm totally blanking. Oh yeah, that's what it was. Okay, so my friends actually said once I started taking medication, they're like, Shri, oh my God, you're moving so much better. And I thought, what do you mean? I wasn't moving better before. They said, no, you're really stiff. And I looked at them and I said, why didn't you say anything? I had no idea. But they said, how do we bring up something like that to you? How do we say you're moving really stiff? Like they can tell me if there's a piece of lettuce stuck in my teeth, but they can't really tell me you're moving more stiffly. There isn't like a kind way or a textbook on how to say that. So the medication did make a huge difference. I noticed within the first month of taking it, it's like I had a new life. I had this amazing ability to move and talk and speak that I didn't realize I was struggling with. But my doctor, actually my trial doctor, as part of the trial, said, Shri, you have a symbol of dopamine tattooed on your arm. Maybe it's time you think about taking the medication because it's about that time for you. And so that kind of quirky comment finally got me going and agreeing to take the medication. So I think when it's time to take medication, you really should trust your doctor, but also trust your instincts as well, and have a serious conversation with them. Because share your fears, share your concerns, and let them know. And then hopefully they'll respond in a kind and similar manner and give you the advice and the courage and the information you need to proceed.
So I think most people believe, of course, that taking medication doesn't affect the long-term effects of the medication and doesn't bring the dyskinesias on any quicker. So I think when I started taking medication, I sort of took some pills and I said, I'm not really sure this is helping me at all. I couldn't really see it. And maybe it's part of maybe I just wasn't able to see it. But then, of course, 10 years later, when I don't take the medication, I have off periods that are very apparent to me, and it's very apparent when I'm on and off the medication. So I think it's just a progression of the disease that you need the medicine more and more as you go along. And I think my advice would be, if the medicine helps, take it. It's not going to, as best we can tell, it doesn't have any long-term negative side effects or problems. So if it helps, it's worth taking.
And I like to tell people too that are feeling really anxious about it, you can also trial it And if it doesn't work for you, you can stop it with guidance with your physician. You don't stop stuff cold turkey, but you don't have to be on something forever, but at least try it to see if it makes you feel better.
As far as my experience of starting medication, I I didn't start when I was told by the doctor that I should start because he had a very strict regimen he would recommend for everybody, and I knew I wanted to participate in a clinical trial. So I just want to flag that for people that if you think about this question and you think you may be interested in participating in research, discuss that with your physician that's treating you because if they think it's okay and you agree that it feels like maybe you can hold off on medication and that might enable you to participate in a research trial you want to participate in, something to think about because there's a lot of trials that don't let you in if you have taken medication for a certain number of days or weeks. There's variation there, but yeah. So that's just my thought about that. Yeah, Devon, what do you got?
Say that's a really good point. And when I kind of got out of the cloud of I have this, and I looked for clinical trials as well. And one of the challenges I had, which hopefully not too many people experience, is that I was too young for most of the trials. And then when I finally got to be the age where I could participate in a trial, I was taking medication by then. I wasn't going to like not take it because of the trial. So I kind of found myself in between a rock and a hard place a little bit. But I will say one thing about taking medication for me, I have no idea when I started, to be honest. I'm sure there's like records somewhere. But several years in, I started some medication, and it's ratcheted up and different medications and different things like that. But one of the things that helps me that my doctor said, probably only once, well, he must say it several times, and that is that, he gives me some hope because he keeps saying things like, well, we still have a lot of tools in the toolbox. Like we still have a lot to like use to help me before it's kind of like, okay, you've run out of options. And if this isn't working, then you've got nothing else to do. So, I don't really know what those options are totally, which is why I like participate into these webinars and learn things and listen to things and read things, figure out what is he actually talking about. But it does make me feel a little bit more optimistic to say, okay, I'm in like the beginning half of what you can do for me, and it's been X amount of years. So
Hope is important. I think it's huge. Yeah. And to have somebody who will guide you that way, Devin, I think that's awesome. My provider says the same thing. Yeah.
So I think one common answer to this question that people say is as soon as your symptoms start to limit your ability to do the things you want to do, that's a good cue for you to start thinking about at least talking with your doctor about starting if you haven't started before that point. Um, Whether that's great advice, I mean, I found it useful for me, but I don't, you have to choose your own adventure, so to speak, in that regard. If you want to wait to do that, I think once it starts to impact you and you can't do what you want to do, from my perspective now, not worth it to wait after that point because the medication can potentially help you a lot, and it certainly helps me a lot. But anyway, we're coming up close to the time we of an hour that we've been on this call, and I think I don't want to pass by the slow progression comment a little bit if anybody has anything to add on that. But if yeah, Sri, what do you got?
I was told by my neurologist that I am a slow progressor, but that was in the beginning. Right now, I don't know. But I will say the one thing I truly believe that slowed my progression was joining a medical trial and getting that care from the doctors and the people that I would see initially every week and then every month. Like getting that attention and just knowing I had a team of people looking out for me and just monitoring my stats, so to speak. I think that was very formative in how I viewed the disease. And it really helped me stretch beyond my limits and believe that I could combat this or surmount any challenges the disease gave me. There's the doctors, and including my current neurologist and my old neurologist, who really gave me that faith that I would be able to do this. And I think that's really vital to have a strong connection with your neurologist if you are able to find one that you have a strong connection with, or some group of friends that really encourages you, like something where you're touching base, because I cannot stress enough how important community is in a disease like this, with any disease, really. But with Parkinson's, that's the one I know. So having a community of friends that are going through something similar to what you're going through, having them encourage you and push you, and then laughing together over stuff you cannot do, that is more, that there's more hope and cure and joy in that than there is in almost anything else.
Yeah. Thanks, Sri. I had that experience too with regards to the trial. Best experience I've had with Parkinson's so far in terms of care was in the trial I was in because I just got to spend so much more time with a nurse, really, is what it boils down to. Shout out Michelle at University of Maryland. It's just so great to be able to spend so much time with the nurse and the medical assistants and even the physicians too. I mean, I didn't get to spend nearly as much time with them as I did with the rest of the staff, but I did spend a lot more time with them than I spent with any other doctor I've talked with. So that was my experience to a T. I think I'd like to maybe try to wrap this conversation up if we can by asking the panelists if there's anything you're thinking about now that is sort of on your mind, a big question that's on your mind lately that you don't feel like you really have a great answer to, maybe. And I realize I'm sort of putting you a little bit on the spot here. So if you don't have anything here, no big deal. Don't worry about it. But I'll give an example of something that's on my mind as you sort of think about this. And I don't know that we have to go too deep in these because I think the questions that are on my mind now, I don't know that we really have a lot of answers to. And I would guess that if you have a question on your mind, you probably don't have an answer for it either. And I bet I don't if it's on your mind too. So anyway, let's just see. One of the questions on my mind lately is how do I know when I see a shadow moving on the wall and I don't know what it is? How do I know if this is just the trick of the light that would happen to me? My eyes are getting worse because I'm getting older compared to a hallucination sort of experience that might come with Parkinson's as it advances. I don't know how to distinguish that. Like, how do I know when it's a hallucination rather than just me seeing something differently because of the lighting or because I'm older or whatever it might be? I don't really have a sense of how to know the difference.
I think that's trouble with that. You can't always know the difference. Sorry, Devon. I don't know. I had a hallucination. I thought I had a complete conversation with my husband. It was very specific and it was, very complete. It lasted for like a good 5 minutes. And then he came down and I said, well, I just said I was going to do this. We talked about it for a long time. And he's like, I haven't even been home. And I was just like, what? Just then I realized like that it was so real. It was as if it just was no different than us sitting here talking, and that was frightening. So I knew after the fact when it was pointed out to me. But Devin, what were you going to say?
Oh, your comment is so much more profound than mine. Mine was going to take it back to just the idea, Chris, that you were saying, whether, I mean, not hallucinations, that's not my experience or I'm worried about at this moment, but yeah, just aging, right? And like other things. And what is something else versus what is Parkinson's? And I will say this is probably not what you're thinking about, Chris, but in my group of friends, perimenopause and menopause is like all people are talking about. It's kind of dominant everything. So that being said, I'm on the younger side of my group of friends, but they kind of have teed me up for all these things that are going to happen that I don't know. Again, is it Parkinson's? Is it just getting over? Is it just changes in phases of your life? So, or is it just, or is it exacerbated? Or will it be exacerbated by Parkinson's? So I think differentiating those things is important, or at least trying to. And also, I think one of the challenges is with other people sometimes, and I know this has been a topic of conversation in other webinars, but that is, if I say something that's challenging for me and other people say, well, I forget words all the time too, or and you're like, okay, I'm sure he's doing that, but maybe ours is different. I don't really know, so I think that challenge of differentiating is something to think about.
Yeah, and Chris, I have some of those too, the weird visual stuff. And what I've decided is if it's not bothering me, if it's not disrupting what I'm doing or making me feel unsafe or unsure about myself, then I don't bring it up. If it's starting to impact my life in a way, it's sort of like that same thing, taking medicine. For me, when I couldn't exercise the way I wanted to, I started taking medicine, and it really helped. I won't bring it up at my neuro appointment unless it's causing me distress. If it's making me drive funny, am I seeing it only when I drive? Those kinds of things. So I don't know if that helps you or not.
Yeah, sure it does. Yeah.
I have just a general, more general comment. I feel uh, like in self-development, they talk about, the quality of the questions you ask is pretty much going to be the quality of your life, like where your focus goes, your energy flows, kind of thing. I believe that to some extent. I wish I had pulled in earlier on a lot more value and emphasis on things that were not Parkinson's, realizing how full my cup was in other ways. And I'm a ruminator big time. And so that did help me a lot. And I think a question that might have helped me a lot with the quality of my life was just, what else am I interested in? What could I distract myself with? Um, why, how could I be useful here? Or, what makes me laugh or things like that. It sounds kind of silly, but that was so more important to my quality of life and such a more important question for me that would shape my future than a lot of the questions we're asking today.
Yeah, what can I do today instead of what can't I do? Is that
And
what you're
adding,
meaning, kind of?
yeah, but also just adding new things. It's easy when you're losing something. It's like, let's say you want to quit smoking. You can't just sit there and quit. Like it's better to add exercise or a new habit or a
Eating
new hobby.
carrot.
I think I felt like I'm potentially going to lose something, or I pre-mourned it before I lost it. And I think if I'd spent more time, I wasn't working anymore, and I felt sorry for myself and I felt a big empty hole. And I wish I'd tried to fill that up sooner with all this opportunity to learn new things or try a new skill. When I first met you, Kat, in person, and I saw you in in Spud, your little Airstream, and you were showing me your watercolors, and I
Mm,
thought, wow, I could watercolor. I mean, it wouldn't be good, but I could do it.
I'm not any
Um,
good. I like to play in the paint.
I think the quality of life over these last years would have been so much better if I had just put my focus a lot elsewhere. And on the flip side of that, I entrenched myself in this community, which is great. And that support is important. So there were good things that came out of this too. But
What else? Any other questions on anybody's mind these days? Any other things you've been noticing before we wrap
Um,
up?
for me, really quickly, I've been struggling with should I get DBS or not?
Mm.
And I've had friends who've gone through this and they've had varied results. And I've been in this now 11 to 12 years, depending on how you count. And I know people get DBS a lot earlier in the disease progression. So I really don't know. I know that DBS will help with the dyskinesia, or that's what they say. Everybody is different and all that stuff matters. So it's something I'm really perseverating on. A word I only learned 10 years ago.
Well, I had DBS about 5 months ago, and I'm still not completely sold on the process. So I'm having trouble with balance and dizziness, and I'm meeting with my helper tomorrow, the person who helps organize the DBS and programming of it, and hopefully she can make some changes that'll be positive for me. But there's been a lot of good things about it, and most people say it helps, but it's quite a leap of faith, I think, to jump into having someone put a wire in your brain and sort of be stimulated in different ways that I don't think people completely understand. So it's definitely a jump.
Yeah, it's on my mind too, Shri, because I have, my symptoms are become my off time, though you can't see most of my symptoms. When I'm off, it's really hard for me to do a lot of the things I want to do. And I'm taking doses some days, every 2 hours almost. And it's just like, it's getting to be a problem. And so I'm like, okay, well, generic Rytari is available. I have a prescription for that. I've never had that before, so I'm gonna move down that road. But if this doesn't get better soon, I need to take an action really, like it's getting untenable. So I have to make that decision too. So I'm right there with you. On that front, one of the things for me is I'm thinking about, well, what about these trials where that you can't participate in once you have DBS? I'm thinking about the Blue Rock or the Aspen neuroscience stem cell trials or some of the gene therapy work. I don't know that that's right for me. I'd have to go down that whole road, but I can't separate those two questions from my consideration, about trials in DBS. I can't separate those two questions in my mind. So
One quick thought about that is often the trials that now come my way, I'm too old in the disease to be participating in it. Like you have to have had the disease or been diagnosed under 10 years. The other one is that you have to be very consistent in taking your medication. So like the same time every day, like for the entire day for like a month or plus. And that is hard for some people with Parkinson to do because especially if you have varying work hours or you've got kids or you've got whatever is going on in your life, you have to wake up in the morning and you have to go all the way through night. So some days you have a shorter day, some days you have a longer day. So you might need that extra boost for a last pill. And your doctor will normally tell you you can go, you can navigate between this and this. Like this is your how much you can navigate with. And if you find yourself taking more, you need to talk to me. But it's very hard to have a steady, for me, to have a steady pill intake. And that disqualifies me from some medical trials, along with my length that I've had the disease diagnosed and all sorts of things.
is that
So
by
that's a little bit frustrating.
can I ask you, is that a problem for you with regards to the timing because you're working and you need to sort of make adjustments to get yourself through the things you have to do during the day? Is that why it's not consistent for you? That's why it's not consistent
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah, because if I'm at a work conference, that's going to be like 6 in the morning till 10 p.m. at night. And so I have to make that the max 4 pills I can take really stretch that time.
Mhm. Yeah, it's that way for me with reffing too. I have to take a dose when I'm going to ref, or I'm not going to be able to keep up. And I want to do that because it serves me. But anyway, yeah, so I relate to that experience a lot. Anybody else have something they want to chime in on with the questions before we wrap up?
I've really enjoyed talking to everybody today.
Yeah, it's been nice.
It's nice
Yeah,
to
this has
see
been fun. Thanks for
everybody's
taking the time,
faces.
everybody. Yeah.
Stan, I hope your appointment goes well. I hope
Oh,
you
thank
get
you.
some tweaking with the DBS stuff. Ask for the secret sauce or the magic fairy dust. Those are the two things that I always ask for with everything. I haven't found it works, but it makes me feel better. And usually you get a tickle out of somebody, or give them a tickle.
Okay.
And
Good advice. Good advice.
hey, Stan, if you're willing, let's make sure to loop back around to this in April if we can and see how it
Yeah.
goes after you have your next appointment. That'll be between now
Yeah.
and the next meetup, yeah?
It's tomorrow.
Oh, great.
Tomorrow.
Yes, indeed. So yeah,
Yeah.
if you don't mind, I'd love to hear an update, just see how it goes and what
I would
insights you
too.
have.
Okay, thanks.
And of course, don't hesitate to call me in the meantime. Anyway, we'll leave that
Yeah.
there, and I think we'll wrap this conversation for now. Thanks, Devon, for joining us. Thanks,
Devon, thank you. It was a pleasure to have you and meet you today.
You all.
and I'm gonna wrap this up now. And thanks, audience, for joining us. And again, we'll be back in your feeds for a live webinar with the audience again in April, the third Thursday of every month. We do this, with this being one notable exception. So thanks for your tolerance of a switch in the plans here, everybody, and thanks for being here with us and watching the recording. Take care, everybody.